to be delivered to the boiler by a small auxiliary steam pump. The rare economizer type differed in that it extracted residual heat from the exhaust gases. An example of this is the preheater drum, found on the Franco-Crosti boiler. The use of live steam and exhaust steam injectors also assists in the preheating of boiler feed water to a small degree, though there is no efficiency advantage to live steam injectors. Such preheating also reduces the thermal shock that a boiler might experience when cold water is introduced directly. This is further helped by the top feed, where water is introduced to the highest part of the boiler and made to trickle over a series of trays. George Jackson Churchward fitted this arrangement to the high end of his domeless coned boilers. Other British lines such as the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway fitted some locomotives with the top feed inside a separate dome forward of the main one. Condensers and water resupply. Watering a steam locomotive. South African Class 25 condensing locomotive. Steam locomotives consume vast quantities of water because they operate on an open cycle, expelling their steam immediately after a single use rather than recycling it in a closed loop as stationary and marine steam engines do. Water was a constant logistical problem, and condensing engines were devised for use in desert areas. These engines had huge radiators in their tenders, and instead of exhausting steam out half the funnel, it was captured, passed back to the tender and condensed. The cylinder lubricating oil was removed from the exhausted steam to avoid a phenomenon known as priming, a condition caused by foaming in the boiler which would allow water to be carried into the cylinders, causing damage because of its incompressibility. The most notable engines employing condensers, Class 25, the puffers which never puff, 46, worked across the Karoo Desert of South Africa from the 1950s until the 1980s. Some British and American locomotives were equipped with scoops which collected water from water troughs, track pans in the US, while in motion, thus avoiding stops for water. In the US, small communities often did not have refilling facilities. During the early days of railroading, the crew simply stopped next to a stream and filled the tender using leather buckets. This was known as jerking water and led to the term jerkwater towns, meaning a small town, a term which today is considered derisive. 47. In Australia and South Africa, locomotives in drier regions operated with large oversized tenders, and some even had an additional water wagon, sometimes called a canteen, or in Australia, particularly in New South Wales, a water gin. Steam locomotives working on underground railways, such as London's Metropolitan Railway, were fitted with condensing apparatus to prevent steam from escaping into the railway tunnels. These were still being used between King's Cross and Moorgate into the early 1960s. Braking. Locomotives have their own braking system, independent from the rest of the train. Locomotive brakes employ large shoe switch press against the driving wheel treads. With the advent of compressed air brakes, a separate system allowed the driver to control the brakes on all cars. A single-stage, steam-driven, air compressor was mounted on the side of the boiler. Long freight trains needed more air, and a two-stage compressor with LP and HP cylinders, driven by cross-compound HP and LP. Steam cylinders, was introduced. It had 3.5 times the capacity of the single-stage. 48, most were made by Westinghouse. 2 were fitted in front of the smoke box on big articulated locomotives. Westinghouse systems were used in the United States, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. An alternative to the air brake is the vacuum brake, in which a steam-operated ejector is mounted on the engine instead of the air pump, to create a vacuum and release the brakes. A secondary ejector or crosshead vacuum pump is used to maintain the vacuum in the system against the small leaks in the pipe connections between carriages and wagons. Vacuum systems existed on British, Indian, West Australian and South African railway networks. Steam locomotives are fitted with sunboxes from which sand can be deposited on top of the rail to improve traction and braking in wet or icy weather. On American locomotives, the sunboxes, or sand domes, are usually mounted on top of the boiler. In Britain, the limited loading gauge precludes this, so the sunboxes are mounted just above, or just below, the running plate. Lubrication. Wakefield brand displacement lubricator mounted on a locomotive air boiler back plate. Through the right-hand sight glass, a drip of oil, traveling upwards through water, can be seen. The pistons and valves on the earliest locomotives were lubricated by the engineman dropping a lump of tallow down the blast pipe. More sophisticated methods of delivering the substance were soon developed. Tallow adheres well to cylinder wall. Sand is more effective than mineral oil in resisting the action of water. It remains a constituent of modern steam cylinder oil formulation. 49, 50, 51. As speeds and distances increased, mechanisms were developed that injected thick mineral oil into the steam supply. The first, a displacement lubricator, mounted in the cab, uses a controlled stream of steam condensing into a sealed container of oil. Water from the condensed steam displaces the oil into pipes. The apparatus is usually fitted with sight glasses to confirm the rate of supply. A later method uses a mechanical pump worked from one of the crossheads. In both cases, the supply of oil is proportional to the speed of the locomotive. Big end bearing, with connecting rod and coupling rod, of a black mill veil showing pierced cork stopper oil reservoirs lubricating the frame components, axle bearings, horn blocks and bogie pivots. Depends on capillary action. Trimmings of worsted yarn are trailed from oil reservoirs into pipes leading to the respective component. 52. The rate of oil supplied is controlled by the size of the bundle of yarn and not the speed of the locomotive, so it is necessary to remove the trimmings, which are mounted on wire, when stationary. However, at regular stops, such as a terminating station platform, oil finding its way onto the track can still be a problem. Crankpin and crosshead bearings carry small cup-shaped reservoirs for oil. These feed pipes to the bearing surface that start above the normal fill level, or are kept closed by a loose-fitting pin, so that only when the locomotive is in motion does oil enter. In United Kingdom practice, the cups are closed with simple corks, but these have a piece of porous cane pushed through them to admit air. It is customary for a small capsule of pungent oil, aniseed or garlic, to be incorporated in the bearing metal.
Yes, small break. That's 1 hour, 10 minutes. I don't think I have read this before. It is 4:20. I need a small break, few minutes to drink some cola. I don't think I have read this steam locomotives before. I like to add it to my read list. But we can go look there if I have the steam locomotive. But I have a read list with steam locomotive. I don't think I have read it yet, but let's add it there. I need to read steam locomotive. But that could be the steam engine. I have a read list with steam locomotives there. If I can find it, that's read list. Yes, let's put it there. And a paper clip there. Let's look there. I have also see how many, more than 22 read lists, but we have a read list with steam locomotives. That was the read list with Germany, Lower Saxony, Hanover. I did move to the Harzen. This is the engine, this petrol engine read lists. I like to read all this. That's the Autobahn, and got more there. Audi, Opel, Henry Ford, Volkswagen there. That's the Mercedes-Benz, Carl Benz, Bertha Benz, all the Mercedes there. Then we had a read list there, 13, but that's 13 and 12, that's the Teutonic orders, I think, read this. Teutonic orders, that's the Neckarsulm, the city there. Then got all kind of the Neckarsulm, this NSU museum. That's some read list there, the car brands there, about the Wanker engines there. Here we have the steam engine read lists, yes. That's a steam engine, I read this one. Then we go to the steam locomotive. We have the steam locomotive there, but that's the one we're reading there. So we have not read it there, but we'll not continue this. I think I did read the steam engine, I did read, and then I did make the steam locomotive, so I have not read this, but I have seen it. And then this continue all the steam stuff, engine, but we're not going to. If I should do this, will be like many weeks before I can continue this, so we have to read it again later there. Then we are going back to the electricity there, and let's continue there on lithium, all kind of batteries there. Then we are back to the calculator, all kind of calculator, mathematics, all kind of calculators there. Then computer science, computer programming language, we are back to there. So then we have another read list, this about Egypt, additional about old kingdoms in Egypt there. Then we got the Ukraine read list about the war in Ukraine, or Romania, Moldavia, Poland, countries around. I had to write it again. Then the regional read list there, and let's put this back, and we got another more read list there. So, and more there, that's my read again read lists. So but maybe we should read the steam engine read list again, but I like to continue this, or can never continue because it takes really long time. I like to, next is this railroad. I not remember what I was going, but I have more, but I'm not going to click anything now because then this auto reading will stop. But I have everything is written down there. But I think soon we have to jump back. To go and read some days on my computer, like 1 week. We have to spend many days read more about the computer PDF. Then I jump back to this read list. Nothing about computers, but I need to finish this about this railway and Harzen. And I read about the moon and stuff. Probably I should read about the war in Ukraine. Of course, that's from 4 months ago, and I made a video every day about this war in Ukraine. I do that in Danish. I made it today, the day 122. So I have to read that in soon, a few days. Yes, let's just continue. And I'll not eat any food, but I'll eat a little bit food when I'm finished do this. No, I have to read this steam engine again. There's too much information. No, not the steam engine, the steam locomotive, and we have to read it again later. Because that's a lot of information. So, but we can do that, I can read it again later. When I'm getting back to my steam locomotive read lists, we could do that. So, but now it's 4:30 and have record like 1 hour and 20 minutes. Could maybe, oh no. Could maybe finish this before the camcorder's out of power. Let's continue.
To warn if the lubrication fails and excess heating or where occurs. 53. Blower. When the locomotive is running under power, a draft on the fire is created by the exhaust steam directed up the chimney by the blast pipe. Without draft, the fire will quickly die down and steam pressure will fall. When the locomotive is stopped, or coasting with the regulator closed, there is no exhaust steam to create a draft, so the draft is maintained by means of a blower. This is a ring placed either around the base of the chimney, or around the blast pipe orifice, containing several small steam nozzles directed up the chimney. These nozzles are fed with steam directly from the boiler, controlled by the blower valve. When the regulator is open, the blower valve is closed. When the driver intends to close the regulator, he will first open the blower valve. It is important that the blower be opened before the regulator is closed, since without draft in the fire, there may be backdraft where atmospheric air blows down the chimney, causing the flow of hot gases through the boiler tubes to be reversed, with the fire itself being blown through the fire hole onto the footplate, with serious consequences for the crew. The risk of backdraft is higher when the locomotive enters a tunnel because of the pressure shock. The blower is also used to create draft when steam is being raised at the start of the locomotive's duty, at any time when the driver needs to increase the draft on the fire, and to clear smoke from the driver's line of vision. 54. Blowbacks were fairly common. In a 1955 report on an accident near Dunstable, the inspector wrote, in 1953 23 cases, which were not caused by an engine defect, were reported and they resulted in 26 enginemen receiving injuries. In 1954, the number of occurrences and of injuries were the same and there was also one fatal casualty. 55. They remain a problem, as evidenced by the 2012 incident with BR Standard Class 770,013 Oliver Cromwell. Buffers. In British and European, except former Soviet Union countries, practice, locomotives usually have buffers at each end to absorb compressive loads. Buffet. 56. The tensional load of drawing the train, draft force, is carried by the coupling system. Together these control slack between the locomotive and train, absorb minor impacts and provide a bearing point for pushing movements. In Canadian and American practice, all of the forces between the locomotive and cars are handled through the coupler, particularly the Yanni coupler, long standard on American railroad rolling stock, and its associated draft gear, which allows some limited slack movement. Small dimples called polling pockets at the front and rear corners of the locomotive allowed cars to be pushed onto an adjacent track using a pole braced between the locomotive and the cars. 57. In Britain and Europe, North American-style Buckeye and other couplers that handle forces between items of rolling stock have become increasingly popular. Pilots. A pilot was usually fixed to the front end of locomotives, although in European and a few other railway systems including New South Wales,